Hi everyone, Ken from Miniature War Gaming Warriors, and today I'm going to show you my Royal Navy fleet for victory at seas. I've got the starter set from Warlord Games, and I've also got the little add-ons with the submarines. So everything that Warlord do currently, I now own and have painted. So stick around, I'm going to show you all my ships, and look forward to seeing you at the end. Thanks, let's hit the deck. So the Fairmile A motor launch first entered service in 1940. Its original role was to provide anti-submarine activities for coastal escorts. It was shortly replaced by the Fairmile Class B. The A's then entered service into mine laying around the coast, and the B's took on that role. So the Fairmile B, altogether approximately 650 boats were built between 1940 and 1945. Like the Type A, the B type were initially intended for submarine chasers. So the boats were fitted with ASDIC sonar as standard. Their main armament initially reflected their anti-submarine focus with 12 depth charges, a single QF 3-pounder Hoskins gun, and that was fitted at the aft, and one set of twin 303 machine guns. The specifications given for the original 1940 British version as the war moved on. The vessels were adapted to other roles and armaments were modified, upgraded, such as replacements of the 3-pounder with 120mm cannon and removal of the ASDIC dome for more clearance as minesweepers. Some boats were configured as Moto torpedo boats. The Fairmile Class C reused the hull from the Type A, but with lessons learned from the Type A incorporated in such terms as steering and the deck layout. 5 boats of the 24 were built were lost to enemy action during the war. The class was mainly involved in close escort work with East Coast convoys, and some boats were engaged in clandestine operations. Famously, MGB 314 took part in Operation Chariot, the daring raid on St. Nazaire docks. Only 2 survived to this day, one down by me actually on the south coast in Hayling Island, and the others in Bembridge Harbour on the Isle of Wight, so both are actually quite local to me. Although now sunk due to being broken up in 2018, a third survived in Shoreham until 2002. The Fairmile D motor torpedo boat was designed by Bill Holt and conceived by Fairmile Marine. For the Royal Navy, nicknamed dog boats, they were designed to combat known advantages of the German E-boats over the previous British coastal craft designs. They were bigger than the earlier MTB or motor gunboats designs, and they were around 70 feet in length, but they were slower at 30 knots compared to the 40 knots of earlier designs. During the war, some of these boats were used to get down pilots in long-range anti-sea rescue. Since the D could be fitted out with a mix of armaments, it gave it the capabilities for both motor gunboats and also a motor torpedo boat. So the S-class submarines of the Royal Navy were originally designed and are built during the modernisation of the submarine force in the early 1930s to meet the need for smaller boats to patrol restricted waters of the North Sea and Mediterranean Sea. Replacing the British H-class submarines as part of a major naval construction for the Royal Navy during the Second World War, the S-class became the single largest group of submarines ever built for the Royal Navy. A total of 62 were constructed over the period of 15 years, with 50 of the improved S-class being launched between 1940 and 1945. So these motor torpedo boats and submarines come in a box from Warlord Games, and it's £20 retail, and they are quite small compared to the other ships, but the detail's still there and I really like them, and they do add a bit of variety to the gameplay. The Tribal class were a class of destroyers built for the Royal Navy, Royal Canadian Navy and the Royal Australian Navy. They saw service in World War II. Originally conceived during design studies for a light fleet cruiser, the Tribals evolved into a fast, powerful destroyers with greater emphasis on guns over torpedoes than other previous destroyers in response to the new designs by Japan, Italy and Germany. The Tribals were admired by their crews and the public when they were in service due to their power, often becoming symbols of prestige while in service. As some of the Royal Navy's most modern and powerful escort ships, the Tribal class served with distinction in nearly all theatres of World War II. Only a handful of Royal Navy Tribals survived the war. All were subsequently scrapped for hard use, while Commonwealth Tribals continued to serve in the Cold War, serving with distinction in the Korean War. Only one Tribal survives to this day, which is now in a museum ship in Hamilton Harbour, Ontario, Canada. The The Dido class was a class of 16 light cruisers built for the Royal Navy. The first three group of ships were commissioned in 1940, the second group, which was 6 ships, and a third group of 2 ships were commissioned between 1941 and 1942. A fourth group, also described as the Improved Dido or the Bologna class, 5 ships, were commissioned between 1943 and 1944. Most members of the class were given names drawn from classical, history and legend. The Dido class were designed as small trade protection cruisers and were designed with 5 turrets, each with 5¼ inch guns with high angle mounting, far more modern in design than previous light cruiser turrets, and offering efficient loading up to 90 degrees to give some dual purpose compatibility. While some damage was experienced initially in the extreme North Atlantic conditions, modified handling avoided the problem. The fitting of 3 turrets forward A, B and C positions depended on some of the use of aluminium in the structure and the non-availability of aluminium. The original ship of the class, HMS Dido, was mothballed in 1947 and decommissioned 10 years later, and the last remaining in-service ship of the original class being decommissioned in 1954 and scrapped in 1959. HMS Neptune was a Leander-class light cruiser which served in the Royal Navy during World War II. During World War II, Neptune operated with a crew predominantly from the New Zealand division of the Royal Navy. The ship also carried a large contingent of 2nd South African personnel. Neptune was armed with 8 6-inch guns, 4 4-inch guns, 12 50 cal machine guns, and 8 21-inch torpedo tubes. On the night of the 19th to the 20th of December, Neptune was leading the line. She struck 2 mines, part of an Italian minefield laid by the Italian cruiser force in June 1941. The first struck the anti-tank mine screen, causing no damage. The second struck below the hull line. While reversing out of the minefield, Neptune struck a third mine which took off her propellers and left her dead in the water. Neptune then hit a 4th mine and quickly capsized, killing 737 crew members. The other 30 initially survived the sinking but then later died. As a result, only one was still alive when the clearly float was picked up 5 days later by the Italian torpedo boat. The sole survivor, Norman Walton, spent 15 months in an Italian prisoner of war camp, and in 1991 Walton travelled to a small city of Nelson in New Zealand to unveil a memorial to Neptune. Of the 736 that perished, 150 were New Zealand sailors, including 4 from Nelson. A memorial service to Neptune and her crew is held each year in Nelson. HMS Belfast is a town-class light cruiser that was built for the Royal Navy. She is now permanently moored as a museum ship on the River Thames in London and operated by the Imperial War Museum. Construction of Belfast, the first ship in the Royal Navy to be named after a capital city of Northern Ireland and one of 10 town-class cruisers, began in December 1936. She was launched on St Patrick's Day 1938, commissioned in early August 1939 before the outbreak of the Second World War. Belfast was initially part of the British naval blockade against Germany in November 1939. Belfast struck a German mine and, in spite of fears that she would be scrapped, spent more than 2 years undergoing extensive repairs. Belfast returned to action in November 1942 with improved firepower, radar and equipment and armour. Belfast saw action escorting Arctic convoys to the Soviet Union during 1943, and in December 1943 played an important role in the Battle of North Cape, assisting in the destruction of the German warship Scharnhorst, and in June 1944 Belfast took part in Operation Overlord supporting the Normandy landings, and in June 1945 she was redeployed to the Far East to join the British Pacific Fleet, arriving shortly before the end of the Second World War. Belfast saw further combat in 1950 and 1952 during the Korean War and underwent an extensive modernisation between 1956 and 1959. A number of further overseas commissions followed before she entered reserve in 1963. HMS Eagle was an early aircraft carrier of the Royal Navy. She was ordered by Chile during the South American Dreadnought race. She was laid down before World War I, and in early 1918 she was purchased by Britain for conversion to an aircraft carrier. The work was finished in 1924. Her completion was delayed by labour troubles and possibility that she might be repurchased by Chile for reconversion into a battleship, as well as the need for competitive trials to determine the optimum layout for aircraft carriers. The ship was initially assigned to the Mediterranean Fleet and then later to the China Station, spending very little time in home waters other than for periodic refits. Eagle spent the first 9 months of World War II in the Indian Ocean searching for German commerce raiders during the early part of the war. The fleet air arm was desperately short of fighters, and Eagle was supplied solely with fairly swordfish torpedo bombers, and until she was transferred to the Mediterranean in May 1940, where she escorted convoys to Malta and Greece and attacked Italian shipping, navy units and bases in eastern Mediterranean. The ship also participated in the Battle of Calabria in July, but her aircraft failed to score any hits when they attempted to torpedo Italian cruisers during the battle. Whenever Eagle was not at sea, her aircraft were disembarked and used ashore. HMS Eagle was relieved by a more modern carrier in March 1941 and ordered to hunt for Axis shipping in the Indian Ocean and the South Atlantic. Her aircraft sank a German blockade runner and disabled a German oil tanker in mid-1941, but did not find any other Axis ships before the ship was ordered home for a refit in October. After completing an extensive refit in early 1942, the ship made trips delivering fighter aircraft to Malta to boost its air defences in the first half of 1942. Eagle was torpedoed and sunk by German submarine U-73 on the 11th of August 1942 while escorting a convoy to Malta during Operation Pedestal. HMS Dukey York was a King George V battleship of the Royal Navy laid down in May 1937. The ship was constructed by John Brown and Company at Clydebank, Scotland, and commissioned into the Royal Navy on the 4th of November 1941, subsequently seeing combat service during the Second World War. In mid-December 1941, Duke of York transported Prime Minister Winston Churchill to the United States to meet President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Between March and September 1942, Duke of York was involved with convoy escort duties, including as flagship of the heavy converting force, the convoy PQ-17, but in October she was dispatched to Gibraltar, where she became the flagship of Force H. On the 26th of December 1943, Duke of York was part of a task force which encountered the German battleship Scharnhorst off the North Cape of Norway. During the engagement that followed, Scharnhorst hit the Duke of York twice with little effect, but was herself hit by several of Duke of York's 14-inch shells, silencing one of her turrets and hitting a boiler room. After temporarily escaping from the Duke of York's heavy fire, Scharnhorst was struck several times by torpedoes, allowing the Duke of York to again open fire, contributing to the eventual sinking of the Scharnhorst after a running action lasting 10.5 hours. In 1945, the Duke of York was assigned to the British Pacific Fleet as its flagship, but suffered mechanical problems in Malta which prevented her arriving in time to see any action before Japan's surrender. After the war, Duke of York remained active until she was laid up in November 1951. She was eventually scrapped in 1957. All of the ships that you've seen, from the destroyers up to HMS Duke of York, are part of the Royal Navy British Starter Fleet by Warlord Games. Really, I really do think that it is one of the best starter fleets. It's just, I might be being a bit biased there, just because, you know, I'm British, and it is so cool to be able to have all these ships from the Second World War as part of Victory at Seas. It is probably my favourite, I'm not going to lie. Very closely followed by the Kriegsmarine. Value for money wise, I believe it's £80 at the time of filming this retail price, but obviously third party sellers, you can get it through that. And if you want to get into Victory at Seas, you've got a complete flotilla there in the £80 box set. HMS War Spike was a Queen Elizabeth class battleship built for the Royal Navy during the early 1910s. Completed during the First World War in 1915, she was assigned the Grand Fleet and participated in the Battle of Jutland. During the Second World War, War Spike was involved in the Norwegian campaign in early 1940 and was transferred to the Mediterranean later that year, where the ship participated in fleet actions against the Royal Italian Navy, while also escorting convoys and bombarding Italian troops ashore. She was damaged by a German aircraft during the Battle of Crete in mid-1941 and required 6 months of repairs in the United States. They were completed after the start of the Pacific War in December, and the ship sailed across the Pacific to join the Eastern Fleet in the Indian Ocean in early 1942. War Spike was returned home in mid-1943 to conduct naval gunfire support as part of Force H during the Italian campaign. She was badly damaged by German radio-controlled glider bombs during the landings at Salerno and spent most of the next year under repair. The ship bombarded German positions during the Normandy landings on the Walcheren Island in 1944, despite not being fully repaired. These actions earned her the most battle honours ever awarded to an individual ship in the Royal Navy. For this and other reasons, War Spike gained the nickname the Grand Old Lady, after commented by Admiral Sir Andrew Cunningham in 1943 while she was his flagship. When she was launched in 1913, the use of oil as fuel and untried 15-inch guns were revolutionary concepts in the naval arms race between Britain and Germany, a considerable risk for Winston Churchill, then the First Lord of the Admiralty, and Admiral John Fisher, who had advocated the design. However, the new fast battleships proved to be more during the First World War. Decommissioned in 1945, War Spike ran aground under tow in 1947 on the rocks near the Persian Cove, Cornwall, and was eventually broken up nearby. At the current time of filming, HMS War Spike is on sale at Warlord Games for £15. She comes as an individual ship. She is a battleship, so she's very good for your British Navy if you want to get those long-range shots off. And always remember your third-party sellers, you can always get it cheaper as well. HMS Hood was the lead battleship of her class of 4 battle cruisers built for the Royal Navy during World War I. Already under construction when the Battle of Jutland occurred in mid-1916, the battle revealed serious flaws in her design. Despite drastic revisions before she was completed 4 years later, for this reason she was the only ship of her class to be completed, as the Admiralty decided it would be better to start with a clean design of succeeding battle cruisers, leading to the never-built G3 class. Despite the appearance of newer and more modern ships, Hood remained the largest warship in the world for 20 years after her commissioning, and her prestige was reflected in her nickname, the Mighty Hood. Hood was involved in several showing the flag exercises between her commissioning in 1920 and the outbreak of war in 1939, including the training exercises in the Mediterranean Sea and the circumnavigation of the globe with the Special Service Squadron in 1923 and 1924. She was attached to the Mediterranean Fleet following the outbreak of the Second Italian-Ethiopian War. When the Spanish Civil War broke out, Hood was officially assigned in the Mediterranean Fleet until she had returned to Britain in 1939 for an overhaul. By this time, advances in naval gunnery had reduced the Hood's usefulness. She was scheduled to undergo major rebuild in 1941 to correct these issues, but with the outbreak of World War II in September 1939 forced the ship back into service without the upgrades. When war with Germany was declared, Hood was operating in the area around Iceland, and she spent the next several months hunting for German commerce raiders and blockade runners between Iceland and the Norwegian Sea. After a brief overhaul of her propulsion system, she sailed as the flagship of Force H and participated in the destruction of the French fleet, Hms. Relieved as flagship of Force H, Hood was dispatched to Scapa Flow and operated in the area as convoy escort and later as a defence against potential German invasion fleet. In May 1941, Hood and the battleship Prince of Wales were ordered to intercept German battleship Bismarck and heavy cruiser Prince Eugen, which were en route from the Atlantic, where they were to attack convoys. On the 24th of May 1941, early in the Battle of the Denmark Strait, Hood was struck by several German shells, exploded and sank within 3 minutes, with the loss of all of 3 of her crew. Due to her publicly perceived invincibility, the loss affected British morale. The Royal Navy conducted 2 inquiries into the reasons for the ship's quick demise. The first was held soon after the ship's loss, concluded that Hood's aft magazine had exploded after one of the Bismarck shells penetrated the ship's armour. A second inquiry was held after complaints that the first board had failed to consider alternative explanations, such as an explosion of the ship's torpedoes. It was more thorough than the first board and concurred with the first board's conclusion. Despite the official explanation, some historians continue to believe that the ship's torpedoes caused the ship's loss, while others proposed an accidental explosion inside one of the ship's gun turrets that reached down into the magazine. Other historians have concentrated on the cause of the magazine explosion. The discovery of the ship's wreck in 2001 confirmed the conclusion of both boards, although the exact reason for the magazine detonation is likely to remain unknown since that area of the ship was destroyed in the explosion. At the time of me filming this video, HMS Hood is £15 at Warlord Games at retail, and you can obviously get that cheaper at third-party sellers. Just for historical value, I think HMS Hood should definitely be part of, your Royal Navy flotilla. I've been really happy painting it up. I've been happy with painting all of these up, to be honest with you. It's been really nice break from doing 28mm figures, and it's something a bit new to me, and reading about some of the history and learning about some of the history behind all these ships, it's been really good fun, and I definitely would recommend Victory at Seas to new players. I just want to say, guys, if you're not subscribed, hit the subscribe button and don't forget to turn on the notification bell. Give this video a like and a share, and I look forward to seeing the next one. Bye bye for now.